Well, today is a very special day because today is Tassie Grammar's birthday. Happy birthday, Tassie Grammar.
Thank you, Kieran, but technically it's not actually my birthday today.
Oh, really? Why isn't it your birthday?
Mate, I was born on the 29th of February, and so I celebrate one every 4 years. Today, we'll say it's 25% of the way towards my next birthday.
So, how old are you in leap years? Actually, no, we won't ask that. We won't ask how old you are. People might find out. Yeah, that you're not as young and pretty as you look.
That's a bit rude, mate, actually, to tell you the truth. I'm insulted by the thought that you even need to ask that.
Fair enough, then. I won't ask.
Yes, I'll celebrate my birthday today. My family likes to think that at least my grandparents liked to think that I celebrated it on the 1st of March rather than the 28th of January, because technically it's the day after the 28th of February that I was born.
That's what I would have thought as well. But, yeah, but I think since you've got that weird kind of circumstance, you can celebrate it whenever the hell you want.
Yeah, but I was born on the last day of February, so I'll just celebrate it whenever I want. Thank you. Yes, and whenever it comes around, the actual real birthday, I actually celebrate for a week. So, and normally I'll have a party in like Brisbane, and then I'll have one back home, and then with Susan's family or something. So yeah, look, it's an interesting thing, and I've had to explain many times throughout my life how it all works. But yes, today is my birthday, and thank you for bringing that up.
Well, because it's not technically your birthday, I'm not going to get you a present. And yeah, so don't expect one. But how about this? I'll house you for a few days at my place and we can go shoot some photos together.
A present would be better, I think. No, that would be fine. Look, that'll be fine. I'm happy to do that. That'll be cool. Looking forward to coming over to Melbourne later this week. That'll be a pretty full-on time again. Obviously, we're planning for the Instameet on Saturday afternoon, which it is this weekend, mate. So, yeah, we've had a massive response to this one. This is pretty awesome to see how many people have registered. We don't kind of want to let everybody know until the day how many people have come or have registered, but it's going to be quite a big turnout, and I'm quietly nervous about how many people are going to be there. Hopefully the day works out nice and smoothly for us.
Yeah, it might look like we're staging a giant protest along South Bank, but who knows? We'll see how it goes. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to meet everyone and just have a good time out in the city. It's going to be nice weather, it seems, and hopefully we'll get a good sunset out of it as well.
Well, I hope so. If we don't get a good sunset, it's your fault entirely. I'm going to blame you. So yes, it better be a good one. But it's supposed to be pretty warm. I mean, on Thursday when I do arrive, it's 37 degrees or something.
Yeah, it's hot all week here. It's going to be ridiculous. So I won't take you to any waterfalls because they're going to be all dried out. So we'll have to find something else.
Okay, well, I think we're going to be doing a bit of a recce around the city on Thursday. So I'm going to bring some ice packs to tuck into my shirt. I'll bring a really wide floppy hat to wear, a pair of thongs, so that I get a nice tan on my feet. I'm not looking forward to that part of the trip. It's looking like it's going to be pretty hot. So
maybe if we get out either late at night or early in the day and just try and beat some of the heat.
Yep.
We could go for a swim in the Yarra.
No,
you don't want to do that.
You can go for a swim in the Yarra. I'll be happy to sit there and take videos of it and post it to stories and show people how stupid you are.
All right.
Hopefully everybody's going to have, well, I'm sure everybody's going to have a great time on Saturday afternoon. So anybody who is listening who hasn't registered yet, because it looks like half of Melbourne's registered. So the details are, 4th of March, so this Saturday, we'll be meeting at South Bank. You need to register for this event so we can kind of get an idea of final numbers. So it's projectrawcast.com/Instameet. Come and join us and Nisi Filters who are coming down from Sydney to join us for the day. You'll be able to trial some filters. We've got a special promotion which we'll be offering, and also a prize for the day as well for the best image that comes through on the event hashtag. So yeah, really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to getting out and about elsewhere around Melbourne too when we're there. I think we're doing a bit of a road trip ourselves together, aren't we?
Yeah, there's a couple of places you haven't been, so I'm looking forward to taking you there, showing you some of my favourite spots. trying to get some good photos, definitely getting some good photos, and yeah, just going on another road trip.
I'll definitely help you get some good photos.
Oh, thank you.
If you don't get any yourself, you can use some of mine. I'm happy for that. That's all right.
Oh, I'd love to pay back the favor of using one another's photos. So.
There's an air show as well. What is it? The Avalon Air Show?
Yes, the Avalon Air Show. I was kind of annoyed that you were coming down because I really wanted to go to that, but oh well, I guess I'll have to go out and take photos of scenery instead of seeing some big, loud jets flying around.
I wouldn't mind going. I'm sure we could squeeze it in at some time over the few days. So there's apparently some drones there, so I'll be pretty excited to go and have a look at some drones.
I'd probably want to go for like a few minutes just to see the Joint Strike Fighter fly, and that'd be it.
Okay, well, we might be able to arrange that, I reckon. We might be able to squeeze a trip in and try and go and photograph some loud, fast-moving objects that are big, shiny, and very exciting. We'd like to say a massive thank you to Nisi Filters Australia for their ongoing support of Project RAWcast. Nisi Australia have very quickly become the market leader in Australia for their filters, not just through the quality of their product, but also through their incredible aftermarket support and their support of the photography community as a whole. Both myself and Kieran use Nisi simply because of the fact they are the best quality filters on the market. Now, Nisi are offering our listeners a 5% discount for any purchases made at nisifiltersaustralia.com.au by using the coupon code Project RAWcast at the checkout. So that's all one word, Project RAWcast. This can be used for any purchases of any amount for any Nisi products. So I'd like to say a massive thank you again to Nisi Filters Australia for their ongoing support of Project RAWcast. So we've got a topic here that's probably not as exciting as some of the things we talk about, but I think it's pretty important for the photography industry, and particularly within professional photography industry. And that's actually insurance, Kieran.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What would you like to cover about insurance? Excuse the pun.
There's a couple of different types of insurance I think we should probably talk about here, or could talk about here. Firstly, obviously, is equipment insurance. Second is public liability insurance. Now, as I say, they're not the most exciting of topics in the world, but in terms of professional photographers, there's are things that really every professional photographer should have. If they don't have, I think they're putting their business at risk in some way. So look, let's make this a little bit more exciting. All right. So I've got a scenario for you here.
Okay.
All right. So imagine you have come to Hobart, right? We're standing across from the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery together. We're shooting sunset. So we're right there near the water. Some guy comes up and starts talking to us. You know, he likes our camera gear. He just wanted to talk. He's got his mobile phone out. He's snapping his own little images of the scene. We're sitting there. We're taking some long exposure shots. Doesn't look like we're doing much, but obviously our cameras are working pretty hard doing what we're doing.
I can imagine it vividly.
Now, you have decided that you want a different composition. So you've moved your camera maybe 3 or 4 meters to the left without even thinking and realizing you've gotten in this guy's way, right? So he's a bit upset. Like he's kind of huffing and puffing. He's like, I was shooting there. I was waiting for the sunset to happen. You weren't even thinking. You're just like, I just want to move. And he wasn't actually really taking any photos. He looked more like he was playing Pokemon or something on his mobile phone. Anyway, so he tries to get around you and to get into a slightly better position. In the process, though, he's tripped on your tripod. He's knocked your camera, sent it flying. You did actually try to catch him. You tried. We'll say you tried to catch him. I think you might have pushed him.
Just given a little nudge, yeah.
Now, thankfully, your camera, it's landed on the ground. But it's shattered. It's gone. The camera's gone. And this guy who was really angry, he fell in the water. Mm-hmm. So he's tripped over your tripod, knocked it over, smashed your camera, your lens is shot, and he's fallen in the water himself. I jumped into the water and I saved him. Right, so I saved him.
You're the hero of the story.
All you cared about was your camera, which is that's just like you. I saved him, brought him out, helped him up the ladder, but in the process, he's really twisted his ankle. It looks like he might have broken his leg actually. Anyway, I mean, from then he's gone to the hospital. He's had X-rays. He's not too bad. He's okay, but throughout this, you've lost a camera. You've hurt a guy because he tripped over your tripod. Mate, what happens? What happens if you don't have insurance? What happens if you do have insurance? And now I think this is a scenario that could happen on any given day to photographers all over the world. If you're a professional photographer and something like that happens, there's a lot of things at play here. Firstly, what is your camera gear is gone, completely broken. You as a professional photographer might not be able to do your job for quite a while until that camera is replaced. Secondly, the guy who tripped over your tripod and fell in the water has hurt himself. Now, in the process of you doing your job, trying to get a nice photo, now, in this scenario, we'll just say it was for one of the local tourism boards, right? They were only offering you $1 for the job, which is quite likely here. But at the same time,
I'll take it.
Exactly, mate, if you can get $1 out of one of the local tourism boards here, you're doing well. But for now, even just that tiny little bit of money means you're a professional photographer. So again, your policies in multiple ways here can be impacted on quite a few different ways. So what happens here? All right. Firstly, if you don't have insurance, your camera's gone. You've hurt a guy. You're liable for his injuries. He could sue you. He's tripped over your tripod in the process of you working for $1 for the tourism board. You could be bankrupt for life. It could impact on your entire life. If on the other side of this, you had insurance, there's a few different things that we've got here. Equipment insurance. So let's start with equipment insurance first. Okay. So it's really important to have insurance for your equipment, but there's a few different ways here. A lot of guys think that insurance for your gear can be covered under your home insurance policy or home and contents insurance. But as a professional photographer, in 90% of cases, this is absolutely wrong. If you are using your equipment for a purpose of making money, even if you don't make money, if you're advertising a professional service, quite often your home and contents insurance policy will not cover the equipment that you're using for a business purpose. It only covers personal usages, okay? And also quite often it's not even going to cover it if you're out and about. But I think that's a bit of a misconception within the industry as well, that home and contents insurance can cover your equipment in that situation. It just simply cannot and will not do it. You need to have professional insurance for your equipment. There's many companies around Australia that do it. Now, I'm not going to name any specific brands here because policies can vary from photographer to photographer. But you really do need to cover your equipment in that particular situation. Quite simply, if you lose your equipment through accidental damage, your entire job and business is at risk. So the things that you can cover in terms of covering your equipment, your cameras, your tripods, your bags, your lenses, and the memory cards, they're all things that you can actually cover under insurance. And typically what you would be doing is applying a certain value to your insurance or getting say your equipment is worth $20,000. You would then be paying a premium that covers all of that equipment. Quite often you need to provide the serial numbers for each piece of equipment so they can verify it's actually genuine, so it's real. And then you get coverage for that equipment in the case of accidental damage. Sometimes water damage isn't covered, so you need to kind of make sure of what is actually covered in the policy. In a lot of the research that I've been doing recently, things like terrorism, which is this is actually a thing that a lot of the insurance companies are listing. Acts of terrorism are not covered by insurance. So they've actually got specific, scenarios that could play out where any protests that lead to violence, anything that's kind of seen as an anti-government activity, any of those types of things could potentially not be covered. So you need to obviously make sure of what's being covered in the policy, but it's a hugely important thing to have your equipment covered for all of this type of stuff. Now, the images on your memory card quite often are not covered for insurance. So if you're on a job, you've done the job, something happens to your camera, and for some reason your memory cards get broken, or salt water shorts out your camera and does whatever, the images that are on the memory card generally won't be covered. Okay, so it's only the equipment itself. In the situation where old mate's tripped over your tripod after you did try to do the right thing, I saw, and your camera's been broken, if you've got insurance, you're quite often covered, and you can either get replacement value or repair value for that particular camera, and you're covered, which means a few days later, maybe you can potentially go back to doing your job again.
Right. Well, that's, I suppose, a lot to take in about insurance, and there's definitely a kind of likely scenario. I mean, you had a fairly good imagination there, just sort of tweaking an actual story to make it a bit more dramatic than it actually was. But yeah, it was a real life scenario in a way, at least a lead up to the events where someone actually tripped and fell in the water or broke their leg. None of that actually happened. But it is a potential situation. I have some of my own views on insurance and how to actually cover yourself. I guess for me, any institution that benefits from the fears of the population is an abomination, whether it's government, religion, or insurance. The best insurance you can have is just taking care of your equipment and not leaving it lying around. So in that situation, that scenario that you brought up, where someone's tripped over my tripod and broken my camera and damaged themselves, my insurance for that situation is standing close to my tripod, having my camera gear on my back, and for them to actually trip over my gear, fall in the water, or hurt themselves, they would have to be very close to me and invading my personal space in the first place. And I think about this whenever I set up my tripod. I think, is it going to be in a spot where someone can trip over it? And is it going to be in someone's way? And especially for situations where everyone's heard of a story where someone's camera gear has been stolen. And insurance companies make millions of dollars on the fear in people's minds of what if. And if you've heard of someone's camera gear being stolen, you start to think, oh, what if my camera gear got stolen? Or what if I damaged my camera gear? And you never hear of the thousands of people that don't get their camera gear stolen, that don't break their camera gear, that don't injure people when they're out on a job. You only hear of the times that it does happen. And it doesn't happen to everyone. And the amount of money that you could potentially save by not paying insurance could cover any eventuality. And most people respond to this by the type of reasoning or making up a scenario like you just did before, and think, what if your house burns down while you're out taking photos and your gear is stolen and the thieves smash into your car while they're trying to get away and you break your leg chasing after them? It's like, yeah, what if? Or why not just start to think, what if it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I agree with you as well, but I think my response to that would be, do you have insurance for your car?
No.
Okay, moving along then.
I hate the fact that I am required by law to have public liability insurance. I respect what I do and run my business legally, so I do have public liability insurance because it is necessary, but I hate the fact that I have to pay money because other people aren't responsible for their own actions, and I make it so I am not in a position where I could be directly responsible for injuring someone, say in your scenario there. I'm not going to leave my gear in a spot where someone could steal it. I mean, it'd be nice if you could just leave your gear, walk away for a minute, look for a better composition, come back and everything's still there. We don't live in that kind of world. There are bad people out there. So taking that extra effort just to put a few things away in your bag, move your stuff with you and keep it with you. I mean, if you just want to get an idea of what insurance companies are like, if you have a look at just their like ads for health insurance, they encourage people to be fit and healthy and safe. And it seems like, that's a nice thing. They're encouraging community and stuff. But the reason they want that is because fit, healthy, and safe people will pay them lots of money and are very unlikely to actually make a claim. And so essentially throwing their money away. But if you take those thousands of dollars that you pay in insurance and actually kind of save it up and look after your gear, you're unlikely to have something bad happen to you. And if the unfortunate does happen, you've potentially saved up enough to replace any gear or just cover any unfortunate event that happens. But that's my view. There's people like to have that peace of mind and think, what if? But I like to think, what if it doesn't happen? What can I do personally to avoid those things happening in the first place?
For sure. Look, I think the value that I'm looking at here, and so for me personally, my photography gear is absolutely insured. So I've got a $30,000 premium on my photography gear. I pay $350 a year for that. Now, you and I both have public liability insurance for photography businesses, and that's obviously a actual requirement by many places. Even simple things like here in Tassie now, and so obviously we've covered the equipment. So now let's have a talk about the other side of this now, with when old mate fell into the water and hurt his leg. Mm-hmm. The simple fact of the matter there is if you are partaking in a photography business, simple things like that can possibly occur. And so like if somebody does hurt themselves through a result of your negligence or through a result of an unforeseen incident that has occurred due to your actions, you are actually legally fully liable for that. Now, as I say, we both have public liability insurance. So in terms of that sort of stuff, obviously we are both aware of this. Yeah. But there's even just doing jobs alone. So going into national parks here in Tassie now, even in Phillip Island, Victoria, those sort of things, you have to have public liability insurance because the actual national park itself does not want to take liability. If somebody does get harmed or injured through a result of your negligence, you are entirely responsible for that. Whereas if you don't have insurance, potentially the national park needs to cover that themselves. So there's so many different factors there at play. Like I've even heard of photographers, doing rooftop jobs where they go onto rooftops of skyscrapers and things. And if they don't have public liability insurance, they're not allowed up there. A perfect example of this for me is doing a recent job for Canon, where I needed to ensure that I already had public liability, so it's not an issue. But it is an actual requirement by these bigger brands that you have public liability insurance and you are protected so that their brand is not liable in the case of an unforeseen incident. So in terms of that sort of thing, like the two elements there at play are having your equipment insured. For some people, it is important. And I think when you're talking the amount of dollars and the amount of money that some of us have invested in gear, and I don't, like even yourself, I know that, and that's fine. I understand both sides of the story here. $350 a year is, for me, not a lot of money to ensure that my equipment can be replaced in the case of an incident. Now, I have personally had an incident where a camera fell into the water. I have personally been with another photographer where his camera and my lens fell into the water. Now, these types of things, they actually do happen. And so for me, I have seen them happen. And I think that's where my point of view of this is maybe a little bit different to yours, where I actually think insurance is a good thing because I have seen the impact of the costs of replacing photography gear as from the result of unforeseen accidents. And the other side of this is, and one thing that I really hope never does happen, but for public liability insurance professional photographers, you are genuinely liable for so many possible things and possible things that can go wrong. So as much as it's a boring topic, it's also something I think that's really important that photographers themselves do consider and make that decision themselves. Obviously, it's up to everybody themselves how they handle that and what they do with it. For me, I personally choose to ensure that I am insured for all sorts of different liabilities. And there's, as I say, there's so many different ways to go about this. I think there's a lot of myths around equipment insurance and public liability insurance itself, and ensuring that your actual insurance provider understands that you are making money from photography is one of the biggest things. I have heard of and had a chat with somebody just in this last week who advertised photography services. Didn't actually ever make money, but he advertises prints on his website. lost his camera through theft and through an exact incident that you were just talking about there. Car got broken into, had his camera gear stolen from the car. The insurance company did a bit of a Google search into him and saw a website of his where he was advertising prints. Now, he hasn't made money from it. He's never sold a print. My understanding, he's never sold a print. But the insurance company turned down his policy from the simple fact that rather than having professional photographer insurance, he had home and contents photography insurance, and that just didn't cover his equipment. And he didn't read the fine print and didn't realise that the equipment can only be used for personal purposes. And even simple things like travelling through an airport, for me, if at any stage any of my camera gear is out of my control, and look, I'm even talking things like my tripod. I don't carry my tripod through my carry-on luggage. I mean, it's a massive big carbon fibre Gitzo tripod that weighs 2.5 kilos with the ball head on it. You can't get that through carry-on luggage. So even simple things like that, for me, that's a $2,000 tripod. If something did happen for that, and my bag went missing, or my bag just didn't turn up at the end point and it disappeared, that's a lot of money to be throwing around. Your camera filters, those sort of things, for me, that's all equipment that you can actually cover underneath your policy. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong there. And for me, as I say, I've had the experience of seeing my own equipment get damaged. I've had the experience of seeing a very close friend of mine lose a camera and my lens through this exact thing. And obviously, I've heard of some horror stories of photographers around the world who have to fight their insurance companies without realizing that they actually don't have a leg to stand on because they didn't understand what they were getting. So there are specific photographer insurance policies and insurance companies out there that you can get to ensure that your equipment is covered in the case of an unforeseen accident.
And I think that's definitely important to think about just when you're looking for insurance as well, if you do decide to get it, is that the insurance company isn't there to help you. It's there to make money for the insurance company. So you need to find out every little bit of detail of what you could be covered for in any event or circumstance that you can think of. Because if you just sort of throw money at them and think, oh yeah, I'm covered, there's a high chance that you might actually not be, and they'll do all they can to keep your money. So you need to find out exactly what you're covered for and make sure that you are covered for anything that could potentially happen to you.
Yeah, look, even the simple process of renting a camera, and this is a story that I'm not going to name names behind this one, but we were on a job for a tourism board here in Tasmania, and one of the people that were on the job had hired a brand new Sony A7 IIR and a 24-70 lens and a 70-200 lens from Sony. So it's one of the hire companies here in Australia. They had it sent out. I think it cost them like $700 to hire the equipment for a week. They thankfully had it insured, because what happened was we were out shooting one night and this particular person didn't have the tripod mount on their camera, decided to do a absolutely stupid thing and tried to balance the camera on top of the tripod without it being clipped into the tripod. If that was my camera, I would have absolutely freaked. But thankfully, this person, even through the act of stupidity, was covered by the insurance policy that they had, because this camera literally tumbled 6 or 7 meters down the side of a face. The first fall and the first thing that happened, we heard the crack. The next 7 or 8 tumbles that the camera took down each time, the camera was absolutely destroyed. And this person had hired this camera and rented it. Thankfully, I think it was done under government funding, and it ended up being covered by the insurance policy. But if it wasn't covered by insurance, this person would have been liable for just over $6,500 worth of damage to this camera, to the company they hired it from.
That's also sort of goes towards my point of if your insurance is looking after your gear, then these things aren't likely to happen. I mean, there is a off chance that something might happen, but you can really reduce those things by not doing stupid stuff like that and just taking care. Yeah, there's legal obligations that you do need to have as far as public liability insurance as well. But the best thing that you can do for your gear and your business is just looking after things. Whether you've got insurance for the peace of mind or whether you choose not to, look after your gear, avoid any kind of hassles and having to go through any of these problems in the first place. And it's going to be a lot better for you.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear some stories of anybody who either does or doesn't have photography insurance as either needed to call on it or kind of knows any stories. So if anybody actually has any stories, get hold of us and let us know, because as I say, I personally think it's a good thing to have. And for me, as I say, the amount of money that I've invested into my equipment to understand it and to know that it's covered in the case of either stupidity or accident is done. So in our scenario, back where old mate tripped over the camera, so you've got to replace your camera now. Thankfully, he's covered by any medical expenses through your public liability insurance, but you've borrowed. So I might have to loan you a camera for a little while.
Oh, that's all right. I can cover it. Or if he's directly responsible for breaking my camera, then I can see what kind of insurance he's got. But otherwise, I've saved money by not having insurance, and I can cover those costs if necessary. I don't know. It can be a bit of a tricky thing and be a bit complicated when you go into all the jargon. But if you can think about how you can avoid the what ifs, and I'm sure with any stories that we get, if people get in touch with us and tell us things that have happened to them, where they either haven't had insurance and they've been out of pocket quite a bit, or they've had insurance and they still weren't covered. We're going to hear stories where things have happened, but there's going to be thousands of stories out there where things haven't happened, but people are still paying the insurance, which then goes to pay the people where it does happen to. Those stupid people who break a camera by trying to balance it on a stick. Yeah, you're paying money to the insurance company to give them the money to pay for those damages.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's, as I say, I mean, it's not the most exciting of topics, but I think it's one that's really relevant to the photography industry as a whole, and something that people really do need to consider and make that educated choice themselves of what's best for them. If you are operating a photography business, though, public liability insurance is and something that you absolutely should have. Whether you insure your gear or not, that's your own personal choice. But any harm covered to other people around you, that's a whole different ballgame altogether. And I think it's, for the amount of money we're talking about, I think some policies for anywhere from $5 to $20 million go for about $250 to $400 a year. If you're using drones, that's a whole different ballgame altogether again. Obviously, your policies are a lot higher then, or premiums are a lot higher. But yeah, I mean, for the amount of money we're talking about, if you do run a business to ensure that you are protected in the case of an accident or accidental damage or injury to somebody else, I think that is something that really should be looked into.
Just to cover myself here as well, my own sort of personal insurance here. Neither I, as Kieran Stone or Project RAWcast, is not a financial advisor and does not endorse not having insurance. Take your own situation into consideration before making any financial decisions. Tassie Grammer and I would like to thank F-Stoppers for sponsoring this podcast. Whenever I want to know what's going on in the world of photography, I go to fstoppers.com. Not only do they provide great news articles and tips for photographers like me, they also have a fantastic range of photography and post-processing tutorials. I personally have watched the Cityscape tutorial with Elia Liccardi, and I was blown away by the amount of information and production value of the tutorial. It was over 15 hours of content, from setting up in amazing locations all over the world to the post-processing and the final image. F-Stoppers are offering our listeners a 10% discount on these amazing Elia Liccardi tutorials by using the discount code RAWcast at checkout. So if you want to take a leap in your understanding of photography and post-processing, head to fstoppers.com and get a 10% discount on Elia Liccardi tutorials using the discount code RAWcast. Thanks again to F-Stoppers for supporting this show.
All right, so let's move along now to something maybe even a little bit more exciting than insurance. Some recent copyright issues and something that you've personally experienced yourself on this one as well.
So just a little issue, nothing sort of too major, but it was just an interesting case that's happened in the last few days, where a Instagram hub that I share some images on shared an image that a photographer had taken, and actually asked that photographer, we really like this image, can we share it on our hub as well? And the photographer said yes. And after sharing it, we were contacted by a company claiming that they had the copyright for this image and they did not give permission for us to share it. I mean, we got permission from the photographer, but there was a company saying, this is our photo. And it seemed a bit odd that a photographer would willingly give away copyright to an image and essentially lose all rights themselves to some art or something that they've actually produced.
No, this is, again, a really tough one for the industry as a whole. I think when you are the photographer, you assume that you own the copyright of an image. But the simple fact is, if you are commissioned to do work for a client who is paying you to do the work, you need to kind of understand the contracts and things that you sign through that process. And quite often, look, if you're doing photography for an ad agency, for example, if you've been commissioned to do that type of work, you most likely won't have copyright control over the image because you are being paid to create that content for somebody else. In the case of these sort of things where, social media type stuff, the guy probably was commissioned to do the work for the company or for the business that has said, we own that image and we would like permission. So understanding those contracts is really important. Again, I'll relate this back to personal experience here in Tassie. We do any work that we have done for the tiny bits of amount of money that we have made for any of the tourism boards here. We maintain joint copyright control. So that is a very specific thing that is written into any contracts, is that joint copyright is a major part of that. So we still own the content. It can be used for specific purposes. If it's been commissioned work we're talking about here, so if you've been paid to actually do a job. On the other side, though, I've done some other work for clients here where I've done some product shoots for some of the whiskey companies here. I've done some event shoots for other stuff. And they actually specifically request that I don't post any of those to my own social media profiles because they want to use them and have the impact of those imagery for their own accounts and also for any ongoing stuff. So, understanding those things before you do a job is probably pretty important.
It does. It comes down to what's in the contract, and you, as a photographer, need to make sure that you read it and understand it. And even sometimes you can have your own things prepared. So if companies do contact you and ask if you can work, you can say, here are my terms of use for the work that I produce. And you can either say that you own the photos and they are leasing them or using exclusive rights to them for a certain amount of time, or if they've, like, for instance, if you were to do it for a particular brand and it's got their brand logos all throughout their images, it's unlikely that another brand's going to want to use that as well. So you don't sort of necessarily need to think about exclusive rights or copyright so much in that case. But you just need to think about the different situations and understand what you're giving to these companies. Because if you sign something that says everything about this image is owned by the company, then legally you've got no rights to that image and you're just giving it away.
Yeah, again, the trade-off there is the financial element as well. I mean, you've been paid to do work for a client who wants an image for a specific purpose. So that there in itself, photographers want to get paid for their work. So not every image that you take needs to necessarily be shared on your own social media account. So that's one of those things I think you just got to consider in the case of doing business is what is it that you are signing when you give a contract to somebody, or what is it you're agreeing to when you take on a specific job? To have joint copyright control is obviously the fantastic and the great outcome that really does benefit. But the other side of that is too, you're probably less likely to be paid good money for that because you get used to those images as well, and you can kind of go and do whatever you want. You can on-sell them to other clients. You can do whatever you want. You can sell them for stock photography. You can put them on your social media accounts. So you're probably more likely to get far less money for that type of work anyway than you are as a commissioned photographer, charging $250 to several $1,000s an hour for that type of thing. And I know another good photographer here, very good photographer here in Tassie. He charges anywhere from $7,000 to $8,000 a day for his work, and he doesn't share them on his own account. Like he's not using it for that purpose. But for the type of money that he's earning, he doesn't need to. I mean, that's really, really good money for the type of work that he's getting. And mate, he's one of the busiest and most in-demand photographers for commercial, architectural, and product photography here. And he works a lot between here and Melbourne as well.
It is a matter of breaking it down and what your time's actually worth. Whether you can say, all right, you pay me this much per hour or per day, and then depending on how many images you want, you can pay to use a certain amount of images for however amount of time. But if you need to sort of start with the highest amount that you want and negotiate with a company to work at a price that works for both people. Because if you start with, I'll give you everything if you just give me a little bit of money, you've got no room to move. You can't ask for more money for other things if you've already given away everything right at the start.
Yeah, definitely. Again, going back to your particular scenario here where the companies asked for it to be taken down, no doubt it was a commissioned job and they probably did have that right to request that. Just one of those things to consider. And I think that particular photographer has now made it pretty clear on his own account that any permission needs to be sought from the company who has bought the copyright for that image. So in terms of that, I'm sure he's been paid anyway. So, probably a win-win for everybody.
You'd hope he's been paid.
Hopefully he got paid a good amount.
And wasn't just paid in a free trip to wherever, and he's actually got time or money for his time.
Absolutely.
So I guess sharing images online, how do you actually make them look really good and stand out and not just be however the computer decides to view them? Do you do anything in particular to your images before sharing them on Instagram or Facebook, or do you just save them as they are and upload them however they are?
It depends on what the purpose is for, really. But yes, there are specific things that I would do for images for particular purposes. I absolutely save my images in a different way if I'm saving them for Instagram than I do to Facebook. And I also save them completely differently if I'm saving them specifically for my website rather than Instagram, for example. So I think understanding the platforms themselves in terms of their actual requirements for an image, but also what they do with an image when you take it and post it on there, that the whole process is really important. I mean, things like sharpening for the web, this is probably something that you maybe have a bit more of an insight into me. I do have a process that I go through, but it's not really that complicated.
Well, there's any kind of search on YouTube or throughout the internet about sharpening for the web, you can find lots of different ways that people do it. The most common way is actually a 2-step process of downsizing your image to about 1.5 or 1.66 to be exact times your final size that you want, sharpening the image a little bit and then resizing it again to the lower image. So you need to have an idea in mind of what pixel size you want your image to be in its final state, and that will depend on the size that, say, Instagram accepts, or the maximum size that Instagram uses or Facebook uses, or 500px, or wherever you're going to share it. And you want to try and maximize that resolution for the size of the media that you're actually sharing it on. And there's a few ways of doing it. It can be a little tricky to get your eye into it to work out how much you need to sharpen it. But there are plenty of tutorials out there, and they don't necessarily mean that one's better than the other. It's just a matter of using your images and seeing which ones work best. And it is worth taking the time to actually try a few different ways to actually step down your image, sharpen it for the size that you're going to share it as.
Yeah, so you in terms of pre-sharpening an image at full size, do you do that?
If it needs it. I mean, every image is different. Some images don't have a lot of detail. They can be a bit sort of abstract and not high detail in the sky or something like that. Sharpening images is a delicate process anyway, and it needs to be done localized. But you can think about each one and have an action that some people can buy actions for this, or you can make your own actions on Photoshop to just have a single process and then make it so you can just sort of tweak the levels of sharpening based on how it looks on the screen.
Okay, cool. So look, for me, when I'm actually preparing an image for social media platforms, so if I'm preparing an image for Instagram, what I'm thinking about here is what Instagram does to the image when I'm posting it into the platform. So to deliver an image to you on your mobile device, quite often the image is small. How would you say? Now, in the research that I've done, we're looking at about 900 kilobytes for a reasonable size, reasonable quality image that actually hits the platform or for what they're actually delivering from the end result. So what I do when I am preparing my images for Instagram is I'm actually saving my image as a PNG file rather than a JPEG. So the reason for this is PNG, there's multiple options and ways to save it, but I'm actually saving it as a lossless and uncompressed file first. Now, I'm also resizing my images very specifically for the Instagram platform. So we know that Instagram has a particular size. For example, the portrait size image is 1080 pixels wide by 1350 pixels high. So I'm actually resizing my image to the specific crop, which is an 8x10 crop, which you can select in either Lightroom or Photoshop. And then resizing my image to be 1080 pixels wide and saving it as a PNG file. Now, I am applying sharpening to it. I'm using multiple different actions that I've either developed myself or that I've got from third-party places, just depending on what I want to actually achieve with it. So when I save the image, I'm actually saving it specifically for the platform, but as a PNG file, so that when I shift it into Instagram, the maximum I'm starting with a maximum quality image rather than starting with a JPEG that's already been compressed and already lost information out of it. So I post as a PNG file into Instagram and let it do its thing then, and compress the image from that uncompressed version of the image. So I'm starting with the image in its highest quality. So that's how I do it. With Facebook, one thing to remember is it's very, very easy to save images from Facebook. Okay, so the higher the resolution image that you have in the Facebook platform, the more likely it is that somebody, when they save it, can get a higher quality image to begin with. So when I'm saving for Facebook, I'm actually resizing my image to anywhere to maybe 1200 pixels wide. I'm also dropping by pixels per inch down from 360, which I would typically save most stuff at, to 240. So I'm reducing that quality to begin with as well. And then also applying a watermark to Facebook so that at the very least, I mean, it's not hard to edit a watermark out, but if you've got a very low quality image in Facebook as compared to your original, it's hard to take that image and go and do something with it on a commercial basis and print it out. So that's kind of how I go about it anyway.
Yeah, and another thing to consider as well is your color space. And a lot of photographers, especially if you're shooting in RAW and editing, you want to have the best color space or the biggest color space to actually edit your images and have as many colors as you can. And one of the more common ones, let's just say Adobe RGB color space. There are other ones out there that are bigger, but Adobe RGB is usually quite fine for editing. But most monitors and mobile phones won't actually be able to display all those colors. So it can be worth converting, if you are using Adobe RGB, converting from that to sRGB. And in most platforms, if you save it for the web, it will have an option to convert your color space to sRGB. And I personally would just use the save for web function in Photoshop after I've done my resizing and sharpening, to similar method to what Tezigrammer does, resizing for what the maximum size or crop is for Instagram. Or I'll probably do it a bit more for Facebook. I'll make it a bit larger, but still I'll add a watermark and keep it not too high in terms of resolution. But I'll convert it to sRGB, save it as the maximum JPEG, and have it as a good quality. And then once I've actually uploaded it, it's up to Instagram and Facebook. I have no control over how they compress it or do anything there. But if you start with the best, then you'll finish with the highest that you can based on however Instagram or Facebook or any other photo sharing site compresses or treats your images.
Yeah, what I think about this, whatever the platform I'm using, is how easy it is to pull a high quality image out of that platform. So knowing that Instagram actually resizes images to begin with is a good thing. So obviously if somebody's going to go and download a 1080 pixel wide image, it's very, very hard to go and print that up as a 36-inch canvas and go and sell it. Whereas on Facebook, it is actually a possibility. I mean, you do lose quality out of it, but what I do is I reduce the quality of my images to begin with when I'm posting into Facebook. So I am saving it as a JPEG before I even post into Facebook. And I'm also making sure that I reduce certain elements of that image to ensure that it's hard to pull that high quality image out of Facebook and do something with it for commercial reasons. You can't really prevent people from doing something with it, but at least you can kind of limit what they can do with it. I mean, very unlikely that somebody's going to go and print it in a magazine or print it up as a billboard if they've pulled it out of Facebook at 1200 wide. You've reduced the quality of the JPEG and you've reduced the pixel per inch count as well. Plus, you've got a watermark on there.
So it's a bit of an insurance by reducing the size of the image and putting a watermark. It's something you can do to prevent little things like that happening.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously you've got to think about that, but at the same time you want people to see the best quality image as well. So it's almost Definitely. A trade-off. It's a trade-off based on the platforms that you're using. With 500px, for example, you kind of really want really high quality images on there because it's kind of the way that it just displays and the way that the actual platform is built is more desktop than it is mobile. So in terms of that, you really want it to be displayed as best as you can on that platform.
Something like 500px as well, they do have a no right click, so you can't just right click and do save image as. There are ways to get those images off 500px, but I mean, with Facebook, you've got a little download function when you look at the images, so it's like you can't sort of stop that, but 500px does its best to stop people taking images off the site, but there's always, or usually, ways around it, even screenshotting, but that's not going to get you a very good quality image anyway. So if someone really wants it, they'll probably be able to get it, but if you can add a little watermark or make it so it's sharpened for that size, it's a reduced size, it's not the best quality that you could have, but it's the best quality for that platform, then that's just something you can do to protect your images and still have them look as good as they possibly can.
That's the same thing with your own website as well. It's a trade-off, isn't it, really? Because you want to display your images as best you can to potentially allow for sales or, whatever you're doing with them, even if it's just in a blog post.
Yeah, definitely.
But so, I mean, with WordPress, if you are using WordPress, it's quite easy to install plugins to prevent right-clicking on it. Obviously, you can't stop screenshotters. There's always going to be a way. The other side is you can also view the source code on a page and still get the actual URL reference to an image. So you're not always going to protect that, but at least you can kind of limit the opportunities for people to take them away and do something commercially with them at the very least. So ensuring that you're actually saving for web, there's two purposes for that. One is to maximize the quality online, but also to protect yourself against potential image theft as well, which is a massive issue, as we've discussed many times before, and no doubt we are going to discuss many more times in the future. So there's very much a trade-off there. You want your images to look the best you can. And look, for Instagram, as I say, my process is pretty straightforward there. I am resizing it for the platform because I know the resolution that Instagram is going to be displaying it in. Whereas on other platforms, quite often that resolution can vary from platform to platform. Maximizing and getting the best out of your image is really just having a bit of knowledge about that, and also just about the saving process to begin with. So.
Yeah, so I'll save 4 different images for 4 different platforms. I won't use the same image for different things because they all display them differently.
Yep, that's cool. And obviously, watermarks is a good way. And I've seen even as recently as this morning, where people, rather than putting the watermark into the bottom right-hand corner, are getting savvy and, say, reducing the transparency of their watermarks and using them in particular elements on the photo. So it's very, very hard to crop it out. So, I mean, say, for example, on a rock that's black, just reducing the transparency of your watermark and kind of making it a bit smaller so it doesn't stand out. But at least you know where it is within that image, and you can always go back and show that if you ever did need to in future. So there are other ways to use watermarks than just putting the watermark in the bottom corner or the middle at the top or the middle at the bottom as well, which could potentially help you save it.
A massive thank you to George's Cameras on George Street in Sydney for sponsoring Project RAWcast. George's Cameras is always on the list of places to go when we visit Sydney. As a photographer, there's always something we need or want, and we know we can get it from George's Cameras. Or we just like to browse and check out all the cool gear that they've got. To support this show and our listeners, George's Cameras is giving away a $50 voucher every month to the winner of our Instagram hashtag competition. All you have to do is mention Project RAWcast in your caption and hashtag Project RAWcast. Tazigrammer and I will pick our favourite each month to share on our account and give the $50 George's Camera voucher to. Thanks again to George's Cameras for supporting Project RAWcast and all of our listeners. we're always looking around to see what other people are up to. And I mean, we're big advocates of finding inspiration and finding people that are really creative in what they do. And we love people that have a passion for photography and love to get out there and really make something of their craft. So we wanted to just mention a few photographers that are doing some great work and they're worth checking out and just seeing what they're up to.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's so many good photographers out there. Like we've obviously discussed some inspirations, but the people that we're about to say now are also very, very, very inspirational in the work that they're doing, and maybe don't have the follower base that some do, but they should have. So Sam Ison, for one, in Sydney is definitely one for me. Sam, so at sam.ison.photos. Sam, I hope I said Ison right. Look, his imagery from pretty much from day one, I've been following him from a very, very early stage on his Instagram account, is incredible. He's just recently passed 10K on Instagram as well. Also recently launched a Facebook page, so Sam Ison Photography. Definitely one to watch out for, and I think quite possibly one of the future leaders within the Australian landscape community. The way he is going in terms of his actual quality of his imagery is just amazing. And not only that, he's also a fantastic guy as well. Very, very, very funny, very intelligent and extremely witty, and great guy to get out there and shoot with. So.
Yeah, and I love seeing his passion for photography and always wanting to learn from other photographers and improve what he does. Is sort of one of those people who's happy with what he's doing, but always wants to take that one step further and get outside of his comfort zone and really like tackle photography and produce fantastic images.
Another one I think that you and I have both kind of started taking attention of, caught our attention recently, is Dylan Gelkin, who is also got this month's cover of the Australian Photography magazine. So his Instagram account is Dylan Gelkin, so DYLANGEHLKEN_photography. The quality of his work is pretty amazing. I've been, again, watching him from an early age of his Instagram. His Instagram account's actually quite new, but we've featured him several times on our hubs here that we operate. And mate, the quality of his work is pretty outstanding. Like his editing skills are pretty amazing, and he gets to some amazing spots as well. So that's another one to watch out for. Go and check him out. Head over and show him some love.
Yeah, it's cool watching his stuff because it just sort of jumps from location to location, and it's like, where hasn't this guy been? And it's just producing some fantastic images. And yeah, I do follow him, and yeah, love seeing his work. And another one that has caught our attention is Isaac Cole. So his Instagram is at isaac.cole, so ISAAK.COLE. He's a fellow Tasmanian.
Yes.
So he's been producing some amazing work as well, and love seeing his stuff pop up in my feed. It definitely caught my attention, and I thought it was worth keeping an eye on and seeing where this guy goes. I think he's a bit younger as well. So he's got
I believe he's only 16 or 17, young fella here in Tassie. I think so, if I've got my facts right. He doesn't list it on his Instagram account, but I've been following him for quite a while as well. And like he's very much a young up-and-comer here in Tassie, and somebody that I've seeing is producing some absolutely quality work, particularly recently. I mean, he's visiting a lot of the locations that I know extremely well and producing some amazing shots, and seems to be visiting at the right time of the day. So I think a bit of planning is going into his photography as well, which is great to see. And I'm hoping to see him grow and also meet him at some stage as well. I'd like to catch up with him sometime when I'm up on the northwest coast of Tassie and kind of get to know him a little bit, because he's producing some really, really cool imagery.
Yeah, and this is by no means a comprehensive list of people to follow, and we could talk for ages. As I think we've said in another episode, we could just go on for ages and ages about fantastic photographers out there, but we'd like to sort of keep it to the local people and some people who probably deserve a bit more attention than what they have at the moment. But maybe we'll be able to talk about some others in later episodes. But definitely check out those three photographers and give them a follow, or just, yeah.
something that's been getting some attention recently. The boyfriends of IG, Instagram, and Facebook page. Pretty interesting to see some behind the scenes stuff of some of these images that are being produced, where the guys are being caught taking photos of their partner in, of what are obviously very, very much set up and, how do we say, fake situations, I suppose.
Yeah, the boyfriends have been the photographers in their own little mini photo shoot that they've just set up there and then. I think you would have some experience in this. You would be considered a boyfriend of Instagram as well. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. I'd love to see some photos that I've been of me behind the scenes of Susan, taking photos of Susan. But yeah, this account actually was shown to me by a joint friend of ours when he was visiting here in Melbourne. We were sitting at one of the bars here, just flicking through the account, and I thought it was hilarious. I was just like, "Yep, I know that feeling. Yep, I know that feeling. I can relate to you, mate. I feel sorry for you." It's actually pretty interesting to see some of these shots where you can tell, obviously how staged they are, and how much effort the girls like to kind of put into making themselves look amazing in these images.
And it's also funny seeing the perspective from behind the scenes, where in most cases the image of the girl will be on a beach somewhere where it looks like they're the only person there, and then zooming back to see the photo being taken, the beach is like packed full of people and they've just picked one angle where you can't see anyone else. And I see this at Lockhart Gorge as well, where it's usually packed with people, and I watch people taking photos right up against the water, so it looks like there's no one else there and they've got the whole beach to themselves. But yeah, it's interesting seeing the way that people would take photos for Instagram, and even looking at Instagram photos and thinking, I wonder what's going on around that whole little scene that they've set up.
Yeah, look, as I say, it's pretty interesting. I can very much relate to a lot of these guys, and I, quite often I'm the one sitting behind the lens going, this just looks ridiculous, but trying to convince Susan of that is a whole different story altogether, because they're the photos that she wants. So
maybe while you're down here, I can get a photo of you doing a yoga pose or something, and you can post it as a selfie.
Mate, I'm starting to worry about you. We aren't that close. We aren't that friendly. I definitely don't want to be on the boyfriends of Instagram account with you taking a photo of me. That'd be just wrong. So,
you just don't want to do yoga. That's all.
That's what it is. Another big thing that's happened this week in Instagram world, we've spoken about Instagram a lot this episode, is the new gallery posts that we spoke about previously have actually been launched to the public. So now it's possible to post 10 images in a kind of a carousel feature, if you like, with Instagram. I've already expressed my displeasure at this particular thing. I'm not a fan of it at all. I do think, though, that Instagram may have been listening to us in our last episode, or second last episode of last year, when we spoke about top 10 posts and top posts. I think this is maybe a great way for people at the end of this year that they can post their top 10 images in one day and annoy us for one day rather than annoy us for 10 days. So I think Instagram may have felt the same way. This actually might be their top 10 post feature. They may have had that code name when they were developing this. I'm not a huge fan of it to begin with. But the other side of this too is, obviously, we treat Instagram as a portfolio. As semi-pro photographers, not everybody does that. So some people just like to share their daily activities of their, the party that they've been to and that sort of thing. So for that type of person, this is probably a good thing.
I think it is a good thing for those people who may share 20 photos a day, and now they can just put it in a couple of little slideshows, so you don't end up with the one person that just clogs up a feed if you are following them. And if you do that and flood someone's feed, it is a potential reason for someone to unfollow you. So maybe this will give a chance for people to share it but not take up so much room on a specific feed. But another way we've both seen it being used is for a landscape kind of crop image. So if you've got an image that's maybe 2:1 ratio or 3:1 ratio, actually cropping it into square segments and posting them up as a gallery, so then people can actually scroll across and look at a landscape image that's a bit larger than, it is a lot larger than you would normally be able to put into Instagram. And it's not an ideal situation, but it is another potential, I suppose, that maybe landscape photographers might look into using.
Yeah, I think it's a compromise again, and I'm not sure Instagram necessarily thought that this would become too widespread. It is very much a compromise, and I think it's cool to see people using it that way and maybe using it for a different purpose rather than just sharing multiple images. But again, I think rather than doing that, introducing a rotate to view feature would be far better use. And I think maybe if Instagram see people doing this enough, they may think, well, okay, there is actually a market for rotating the screen to view landscape formatted images. Ultimately, for me personally, I think it's just another way for people to share a whole heap of bulk rubbish. That's just my opinion. I think
at least it's concentrated bulk rubbish, and it's not clogging up a feed. It'll just be in one spot, and you can choose to look through it or not.
Absolutely. Again, yeah, like, as I say, I just think ultimately, maybe for hubs, it might be a good thing. Again, might be something that I even consider when you feature a photographer, rather than just featuring a single image. Once a week, you could maybe do a whole featured gallery of a photographer. That might be a useful feature. But as a photographer, using it for a branded portfolio, I suppose. For me, I personally don't like it. I'm still yet to see a usage of it that I really think would be beneficial. And I know quite a few guys here in the Australian market are really holding back to see how this goes and see what it gets used for. As I say, I think Instagram may have also codenamed this the top 10 feature. So at the end of the year, that'll be maybe a great way to share your top 10 images. But I think this is just one of those features that isn't necessarily built or used for the professional market at all.
Cool. Well, I think we've spoken about Instagram long enough. Again, it seems to just take up most of our time. But I think we'll leave it there with Instagram stories. Oh, not Instagram stories, but stories about Instagram.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So look, we obviously got a big weekend this week. As we said, we got our Insta meet. Tonight, I'm giving a presentation at the Launceston Photographic Society here, an hour-long presentation of photography and kind of what my photography journey is. So I'm really looking forward to that and having a good chat with those guys and hopefully maybe giving a bit of inspiration and maybe an insight into how you can build a business around photography. So many different ways. So I'm definitely looking forward again to landing in Melbourne on Thursday and getting out and doing some exploring with you as well. But I promise you, I will not be doing any yoga poses for you. Cool. All right. Well, I'm off. I'm going to go and finish preparing this presentation. I'm going to go and eat some more birthday cake and then get ready to fly up and see you and hopefully have some fun with many, many people during our Insta meet on the weekend.
So we'll see you all at Melbourne South Bank at 5 p.m. on Saturday.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I'll talk to you later, mate.
All right. Bye.
See ya.